Hello and welcome back to part 2 of this colour along. If you haven't seen part 1, I'm colouring from the Country Charms colouring book by Creative Haven, and this is part 2. I'll leave a link to part 1 up in the top right hand corner. If you click on the little eye, you'll get the link to part 1. Okay, so now I'm onto the jeans and I'm just covering the whole thing in a very light layer of light ultramarine. And then I'm darkening some of the edges. So around the outside and then down just one side of the seam. And I'm trying to leave lighter patches to the area above the knee. So they just look like kind of stonewashed jeans. And then I'll go in with the ultramarine pencil and darken some of those shadows up a little bit. Now I'm moving on to the socks over to the right, and I'm just covering the whole thing in a light layer of black, and then I'm making it a lot darker towards the left hand side. I'm colouring the little patterned areas in red, which is the light cadmium red, I think. It doesn't really matter. And then I'm kind of burnishing that in with a white pencil. It's the Caran d'Ache pencil I'm using, but you could probably use any white pencil or a blender. And then I'm going back in with the black, darkening those edges again, and then also darkening the little red bits again. And now I've got the Juniper Green, and I'm doing a light layer all over the rest of the grass, this side of the fence. So this is the first layer, and I do a few different layers on this grass. Now what I'm doing is I'm still using the Juniper Green, and I'm darkening some of the shadowy areas of the grass. So basically wherever there's the little jaggedy lines to show like it's the top of a tuft of grass, I'm colouring it dark above that and then fading it up towards the top of that particular section. So darker at the bottom and then fade it up lighter towards the top, and I do this all over the grass on every little bit where I see the artist has drew the separate little tuft marks. And now I've got the light green pencil and I'm colouring in all the tops of these little grass tufts. And I'm just fading that down towards the juniper green colour. And now I've got the earth green yellowish pencil and I'm covering the juniper green, the dark parts, and then fading it up towards the light green at the top. Now with that same earth green yellowish, I'm adding just a light layer over the grass just behind the fence, because I want the grass to be faded more towards the back because it's in the background, and the colour to be a lot richer in the front area, but there was too much of a jump between the front colour and the back colour, so in the middle I'm just adding a little bit of this earth green yellowish to kind of blend that in a bit better, so it's not like a dramatic change. Now I've got the cold grey, I think it's 6, it's one of the darkest cold grey colours, and I'm colouring the edge of the picket fence, just all the little edges on those pieces of wood, just to give them a more three-dimensional look to them. And then I'm just adding a little bit of shading down to the bottom as well, as though the grass is causing a little bit of shadow on the bottom of the fence. And now I'm just doing a little line underneath the horizontal piece of fence. And you can see if you look over to the right how flat they look, but then once you put the little line underneath, that really brings that piece of wood forward. And now I'm moving on to all these little flowers, and I'm kind of colouring this, and I'm kind of colouring them the same colours. I'm using orange and yellow, so this is an orange glaze, and I think I used one of the yellows. It doesn't really matter which one you use. I think it was the cadmium yellow or cadmium yellow light. And I'm colouring some parts pale, some parts really deep. As you can see to the top one, I've made it a lot deep towards the middle. And then with the yellow pencil, I'm going over some of the orange with the yellow, and then some petals I'm just colouring in just yellow alone. I'm just mixing it up with those two colours, just randomly. Some of them are yellow, some of them are orange, some of them are mixed. Some of the middles I've done in purple, and some of them I've done in yellow. Okay, so now I'm onto the flowers that are in the jug on the table. I started colouring the first one yellow and orange, but then I changed my mind about the colours, so I'm colouring the rest the same colours as a sunflower would be. So I've used burnt sienna to go around the outside of the centres, and then I'm using green gold to go around the outside of the burnt sienna. And you can see I'm leaving parts of the petals uncoloured, and I'm going to finish those edges off with a light yellow colour. Then I'm colouring the middles in with the burnt sienna, just lightly. But then a lot darker towards the very centre. And then I finish those centres off by going over them with the green gold pencil. And now I'm just darkening those centres a little bit more with the walnut brown, because I just wanted them a little bit darker towards the middle and the outside. Now for these two centre flowers, I'm colouring the little curved lines in burnt sienna that the artist has put in, but I'm also adding a few more lines myself. And now I'm just using the yellow pencil to go over the top of that. And the green gold just to add a little bit of shading over to the left hand side. And now I'm using the Juniper Green again to paint these leaves, and I'm painting them quite dark, but I'm just leaving a little patch, often just to the right hand side, and then I colour that little patch in with the light green. And I'm also darkening up the green behind these flowers here. I'm using the Juniper Green just to try and darken that to make those flowers stand out a little bit more. So now I'm onto this basket at the back, and I'm using the orange glaze, and I'm colouring alternative stripes one way then the other, and then the little squares that are crossed over by both stripes, I'm darkening those. And now I'm just using the yellow just to colour over the whole thing. And then back with the orange, and I'm darkening the sides and the very top back edge. And now the basket itself, I'm covering the whole thing in a layer of the light yellow ochre. I've just used random colours to colour the little pieces that are inside there. And now I'm using the burnt sienna to add a little bit of shading to the basket. So I'm basically just shading around all the individual little sections just to make them look more 3D. And now I'm adding some shading with the walnut brown, so I'm just shading the very bottom first of all. And now I'm going underneath that ridge. And then on the inside of the basket, I'm adding some of this just to kind of try and darken it a little inside the basket. And then I'm adding a bit of shadow underneath that ridge and at the front. And then that shadow next to that piece of cloth just really brings that piece of cloth forward. Now I'm onto the tablecloth and I'm doing the same as I did with the other piece of checked cloth, only I'm using blues. So I'm using light ultramarine first, and then ultramarine, but I'm just doing the same as I did with the other one. And now I'm moving on to the wood on the table and the chair. So I'm covering the whole thing in a layer of the light yellow ochre, first of all. And now I'm using the bisque pencil and I'm adding some shading just to kind of the edges and just leaving a few little highlighted parts of that light yellow ochre. And now I'm going in with the walnut brown and I'm darkening some of the shadows even more. I'm just adding a shadow there underneath that tablecloth to make it look like it's lifting up a little bit from the surface. And I'm mainly just adding, yeah, the darkest shadows off to the left hand side with that dark colour. Okay, so now I'm on to the little glasses on the table and I've done a little light layer of cadmium red and I'm just putting a light layer of the dark red just at the edges. And the bottom. I've got the sage green and I'm just colouring in that little section above the liquid just to make it look like you can see the green grass through the glass. A little bit of blue at the bottom, like the tablecloth's reflecting through it, and then I've got the, I think it's the cold grey 506, and I'm just adding a couple of little random marks to the edges, but not colouring all the edges in, just little bits. And then I've got the blender pencil and I'm just blending all that in. And then I do the same with the other glass, only I've now changed the green to the earth green yellowish because you couldn't really see that sage green. And then I'm more or less doing the same with the big jar of juice that I did with the glasses. It's the same colours except for the bits of fruit in the bottom. I coloured some of those in yellow and orange, but all the rest's more or less the same. And now I'm just adding a little bit of shading underneath the glasses with that dark grey pencil. Okay, now I'm on to colouring the jug and I'm making it red. So I'm starting with the light cadmium red and I'm just doing a light layer all over, but then I try and make it a little bit darker underneath towards the very bottom and the left hand side. And then I'm using the dark red to try and darken that colour a little bit in the shaded areas. And I had to build this up in a few layers because it was just too light at first, so it took a few layers to get the depth that I wanted. Now onto this cushion, and I just did alternate stripes with the light cadmium red and the light ultramarine, and then I went over that with the blender pencil, and then I darkened some of the areas with dark red and the ultramarine pencil, mainly kind of to the edges. Okay, so now I'm just going to add some final little shadowy areas to the picture. So I'm darkening these spaces around the base of the tree, and then kind of up towards the left hand side of the tree a little bit, and I'm using the black pencil. Okay, so that's the final picture. So I hope you've enjoyed this colour along. I'll hopefully have another one probably next week. All the items that I've used are listed in the description below, and thank you very much for watching.